Hello to you all. My name is Alvin Mwangi Irungu. I am a team leader at Youth Empowerment Movement Kenya, which is a youth-led organization which has been spearheading the engagement of the adolescents and the young people within the community and the development spaces, specifically within the reproductive health spaces we are skilled in. So we will hear probably for the next 1.5 hours to try, we understand, we learn in terms of quite a bit of things that have been happening, and one of them is the Roe versus Wade case within the US, and we will try to understand what is the impact of the Roe versus Wade within the global South, the countries. So countries like us here in Kenya, within the region, we will briefly hear on the Malindi case. It's still a case that declared that it remains illegal to arrest the healthcare providers as well as the young women and girls who actually go to seek for safe the abortion within the context of the law. We will also hear briefly in terms of the EAC bill, which has been here probably, I think, for the last 5 years in terms of the contents of the bill. And then, probably just briefly, in terms of the last key things, is the status of the access to the contraception, comprehensive sexuality, the education within the country as well as within the region. So please feel free to introduce yourself within the chat box. Do also share where you are joining us from. Would love to know that. So we are joined here by a team of speakers who have been within the space. Probably they'll share. And we also have a moderator who will actually be spearheading in terms of the questions for the speakers as well as the audience that is here within the call. Without much further ado, welcome in the moderator, Shiko Kihika, who will spearhead the discussion forward. Thank you.
My name is Shiko Kihika, like Alvin has said, and I'm excited to have this conversation with a team of amazing panelists, amazing speakers who've been in this field for quite some time. And I also understand that reproductive rights are human rights and we should not be begging for them. I will introduce my panelists. I will start my introduction with the only man in the panel, Benson Atonga Chakaya, sexual reproductive health researcher and a PhD candidate at Center for Human Rights, University of Pretoria. An amazing lady, Rachel Mikali, a woman human rights defender, convener of the Coalition of Grassroots Human Rights Defenders in Kenya. And then Stephanie Musho, a human rights lawyer, and the first woman who actually introduced me to this field, and also the first woman who I know has been very vocal, even on the international platforms, speaking about these issues. I also see another Mwikali Kivuvani, Executive Director of Kenya SRHR Alliance. So I will start with Benson. Benson, just tell us a very brief introduction about yourself, but just a deeper understanding of who you are. And what do you really feel? Are you happy? Are you sad? Are you hopeful about the state of SRHR in Kenya? So Benson, karibu.
Thank you very much, Kihika, for the introduction. I've worked quite for a number of years in sexual and reproductive health and rights, particularly in Kenya. I've worked with many young people trying to enjoy their sexual and reproductive health and rights unhindered. The state of reproductive health in Kenya is not that we can, overly celebrate, but we have made a number of progresses, both in terms of, putting in place, policies. And then also the courts have been very instrumental in terms of checking the excesses of the executive, but still we have a lot of opposition that we need to keep check, because opposition will not end. Abortion is still an issue that attracts a lot of emotion. And so we still have to continue ensuring that we safeguard, access to sexual and reproductive health for young people. So I'll be talking more later in this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Benson. I want to jump to Steph. Steph, kindly introduce yourself and also tell us, how do you feel about the state that we are in as a country?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Shiko. My name is Stephanie Musho, and I'm very passionate about issues of gender and reproductive justice. I think this was galvanized by my own experience, because I myself, I was a teenage mom. I got pregnant at 18. I gave birth at 19, and I do recognize the privilege that I had in that I was able to go, finish law school and get my master's, and I'm now doing my PhD. And I keep saying that I am the exception and not the rule, because a lot of girls who find themselves in situations similar to the one that I found myself in either drop out of school or are married off, and they are not able to live to their fullest potential. And so I would say that that's what galvanized my passion for advocating for the liberalization of sexual and reproductive health and rights, not just here in Kenya but in Africa. In terms of how I feel about the state of SRHR as it is now, I think it's very disheartening, to see so many years of effort and progress, being negated by, a few. And so it's really important for us to continue having these conversations and work together, put our heads together to see how, we can remain strong in the cause.
I met Steph through a mutual friend. And the introduction was very weird because our mutual friend introduced us as, teen mothers. And that's why we clicked. And the conversation since then has been me trying to also understand this space and understand actually how privileged you are or you can be to be able to be a teen mother in this country and still go back to school and still be able to access your education and make a life of yourself. We will have a deeper conversation on that. But as we are going towards that, Rachel Mwikali, you work with marginalized communities and especially women. I want you to introduce yourself and tell us also, how do you feel about our state? And especially in regards to those women who cannot really access the privileges of even going back to school.
My name is Rachel Mwikali. I work with Coalition for Grassroots Human Rights Defenders, Kenya, popularly known as proudly Pussy Power, Team Pussy Power. We are based in Mathare Informal Settlement, and we have been working also around sexual reproductive health and rights, and especially with a specific role in access to safe abortion and contraceptive. The reason why we work around this area is because majority of the constituency, and even Mwikali herself and other women who live around me, would say, despite the inequality, we are at least privileged, we are alive, we are not statistic. Because one way or another, we have seen our peers, our friends dying because of unsafe abortion, which for us also, we take it that it's part of torture, because when you're not able to access safe healthcare, like access to contraceptive and safe abortion, and you are the only option you have is to go to a quack, it means government has failed. And for me, I'm feeling at the moment, it has been, like many of us, we have been against the RH policy here in Kenya. We have been fighting also against the Geneva Consensus Declaration. And now seeing the Roe versus Wade and coming it back to Kenya with all the effort, I feel betrayed specifically by my government. I feel that our government doesn't care about us, but at the same time, I'm very hopeful seeing all of us putting efforts together to ensure that we're able to fight for our freedom, we're able to fight for our bodily autonomy and integrity, we're able to fight to our rights of choice. But at the same time, going to the discussion, we are able to see our private decisions, like when you choose not to have kids, when you choose to have an abortion, how that can be seen as a political, because most of the time, when we make private decision, it's seen as that's private, but how politically, how can we make it political to a level that it's able to be seen as a political decision, as a way of also resistance. So I'm looking forward for the conversation to give also my experience from a lived experience perspective, and based on also the work we do in different informal settlements and in the country. Thank you.
I'm going to Mikali Kivuvani. I hope I'm getting your name right. And I just want to understand from you, what do you feel about the status that we are in? Are you hopeful?
As Shiko has put it, my name is Mwikali Kivuvani. I'm the Executive Director of the Sexual Reproductive Health and Rights Alliance in Kenya. The Alliance is a coalition of 20 organizations that all work in the SRHR space and spread around Kenya in different counties. Talking about what's happening in the reproductive space, especially in Kenya, very disappointing, like my namesake has put it, because for the last 10 years, we have been working on pushing for sexual reproductive health policies. And I have to say, a lot of the times when we were even speaking and writing documents, we were talking about a progressive legal framework for Kenya. But now we are seeing that being chipped away very slowly. And we were not very attentive, I have to say, because it has caught all of us like something has just happened, like there's a mind shift. And all our documents are just becoming someone has just decided, anything to do with sexual reproductive health should not be our right anymore. The discussion is even going as far as the discussion, the discussions of removing the word rights from any discussion of reproductive health. At the same time, I am hopeful. I'm hopeful because when we can have these discussions, Shiko, that means people are alert. That means people are woke. That means people are seeing that there's a problem. And I know we'll go into the discussions of Roe versus Wade and what's going to happen, especially looking at the global South. But I'm hopeful because if Africa can then rise, and especially if young people in Africa can then rise and say, no, our challenges are not your challenges, our issues are not your issues, and you cannot dictate to us what will happen to our bodies in our continent. Of course, that discussion brings in a lot of issues to do with the domestic funding, because funding is necessary. But I'm hopeful that we are here in this space. I'm hopeful that we have the fighters like Rachel, we have the researchers like Chakaya, we have the lawyers like Steph. So we have a good group of people that I know it will take a long time, but working together, we will walk far. Thank you.
Before we go to whatever happened with the Roe versus Wade case, I want us to begin at home. We just saw a very weird thing done by the ministry. And I want to bring in Steph on this because I know this kind of pissed you off to the core. The launch of the SRH policy by the ministry, which again, they quote it as something that is supposed to, or a policy that is supposed to enhance the status of the adolescent in Kenya. How true is that? And what does this policy entail?
This policy, I mean, is problematic on a couple of points. It's very discriminatory and it's very inadequate. It's very narrow in its approach to sexual and reproductive health and rights issues. So, for example, it doesn't speak very broadly on issues to do with teenage pregnancies and access to contraception and, safe abortion. Yet we know that, the government itself in the Kenya Demographic Health Survey of 2014, which unfortunately is now outdated, but is the only one that we have as we wait for the government to release the 2022 or 2021. We're having the average debut age for sex is 15 years. Yet, the government is taking, and when I say the government, I mean the Ministry of Health, is taking this position that, adolescents are not allowed to access contraceptives. At the beginning of this year, we saw the Ministry of Health reporting that in a period of 2 months, about 45,700 adolescents aged between 10 and 19 were reported to have been pregnant. And if we, break that down into bite-sized pieces, we can say that on an average day, every single day, if current trends continue, that about 700 girls are getting pregnant every single day. Then we have the Ministry of Health coming in and putting out a reproductive health policy that totally blocks out or is very opaque on issues of access to contraception and how to end teenage pregnancies. In Kenya, every single day, 7 women are dying from complications arising from unsafe abortion. They're getting, their abortions from backstreet clinics, and therefore are getting infections, sepsis. They're dying, and the statistic is standing at 7 women dying every single day, or 2,600 women and girls dying every single year in this Kenya, and that's only reported cases. So this means that figure could be likely higher. Yet the Ministry of Health still refuses in its policy that they recently launched to give a framework as to how to handle issues of safe abortion. I also talk about the issue of discrimination because, for example, if we look at assisted reproduction, the Kenya Fertility Society tells us that at least 4.2 million women and men in Kenya need some form of support or form of assistance with reproduction, that is conceiving a child. Yet we know that as it is, the way assisted reproduction happens in the country it's very elitist, because it's only available in private clinics. A round of IVF could go up to 300,000 shillings per round, and we know that you're going to need a couple of rounds before you actually get successful. So the common mwananchi is not able to get that. Yet how the Ministry of Health framed the issue of assisted reproduction is that it's only available to married couples. Okay, so what happens to those who are cohabiting who do not have certificates? What happens to single parents? So there's very many issues. And then the process leading towards the launch of that document was also a problem. You cannot launch a policy that people have not read. You cannot launch a policy that people have not validated. Nobody seemed to have an idea of what the policy talks about, yet the Ministry of Health continued to go on and launch that. So a lot of issues coming out of the whole process and the contents of the policy.
We launched a bedroom policy, and I call it a bedroom policy because the only people who know what is actually in that document is those who wrote it and those who launched it. In simple terms, Kenyans were not involved. Kenyans don't feel like it represented their needs. It does not also speak to the voices in the room, to the problems that we're facing. Steph has just given us scary statistics. We also understand that women that you find in clinics going for their antenatals are young teenagers. They're basically between the age of 15 to 19 years. So what does this mean? And when such a document is launched and the ministry goes ahead to validate it, and the only incentive in the document is the budgets they're putting in for reproductive health in a process that was full, in the voices that were not heard and that continue to get harm in the process. Mwikali, what does this mean to the younger generations of this nation?
Thanks, Shiko, and thank you, Steph, for giving us a very good and elaborate brief on the reproductive health policy. So what it means is the ministry, for lack of a better word, doesn't care, doesn't listen, and is not responding. And I say this because prior to the first launch, because if you recall, there was a first launch which was stopped by civil society. We had conversations with the ministry. We said we were going to support the review of the document, which we were part of, I have to say. Went and sat with the ministry, had these discussions, and the ministry said, okay, we've listened to you. We are going to go and consult, but what you've said, we're going to have in the document, we're going to add a lot of this. And I want to say some things were added. But for me, it felt like a very hoodwinked process. Because yes, we got some stuff that we had talked about in the document. But like Steph rightly put it, the biggest issue with this document is the discrimination and the problematic language. You're talking about, first of all, it's a 10-year policy. So we have a very bad reproductive health policy for the next 10 years. It's a problem right there without even discussing anything else, right? Number two, you're trying to talk about reproductive health for women and men of reproductive health and other genders, but you're not listening to the concerns and the daily issues we are going through. Steph has rightly put it. the unsafe abortions in the country. So one of the things we'd requested the government to put in regards to the maternal mortality, the 5 reasons of maternal mortality, one of them is unsafe abortions. They did not put that down. They put post-abortion complications. It is not post-abortion complications that's killing women. It is those unsafe abortions. Okay, and that needs to be addressed in its right, just the way it is and the way Steph has put it, and I will not repeat. The issue of contraceptives, the biggest thing about the document in regards to access to contraceptives and everything to do with young people is this issue of parental or guardian consent. Steph and you explained that you are teen mothers, okay? And I'm glad, very, very glad you're on the call, but at that particular time when you were pregnant, would you have gone to your mother and said, hi, mom, I'm having sex. Now I want contraceptives. Let's be honest. So when you put those mikakatis for us right now, when I'm 17 and I'm having sex, but now I have to go to a facility, and this nurse tells you, yeah, now you have to come with your mom. Seriously? And that's when we'll start having a lot of backdoor nonsense, because we'll have people now either stealing government contraceptives to start selling. We'll have now girls deciding, okay, since I can't get here, let me go get here. We will still continue to have girls and boys without information, because one of the things they also refused to put in the reproductive health policy was comprehensive sexuality education. So now you don't have information, you don't have any education on it, you don't have anyone to talk to, and you don't have anywhere to access the services. What do we want? Back to you, Shiko.
Thank you. And that leaves us at a very good point. What do we really want? And is it also that we are in a community where people don't push for these things, that we don't have a unified voice on these things, that the government feels like, you know what, we can step all over them because it's a split voice, because on one side you turn your head and you see someone coming with a weird conversation that abortion is murder. Rachel Mwikali, what do you think about this? And what does it mean to a woman who, because I was talking to a young girl who was telling me to procure abortion from marriage stops. If you don't have 10,000 shillings on you, it's a very difficult process. And also, so it is also for the rich if you want to get to procure safe abortion. So what does this mean for those young women who are even raped, those adolescent kids? What does this mean to us? Rachel Mwikali.
You just remind me, I'm from the same conversation with comrades around reviewing what has happened with the RH policy. And we still insist Dr. Kaliti must go, no matter what. And for him to know that choices have consequences. And anybody who will sit in that kind of a position to know when you make decisions that are oppressive and are putting the life of women at risk, you have consequences and you need to be held accountable. So based on the question around narratives, because I believe in the power of narratives, they change and they make, and even language, they make things move in different ways. I agree with you that like even our position as Coalition for Grassroots Human Rights Defender, it's very clear. There's no ifs and buts when it comes to our work. We are pro-choice. From our side, we don't want to be criminal, especially when it comes to patriarch trying to say this is what it matters. They make decisions on our body and they are not the ones even having the uterus. So from our lived experience here, that's what we feel, that one, even for me as an advocate or an activist around sexual reproductive health and rights, or a feminist who works around intersectionality, that yes, I'm doing the best of advocacy work advocating for safe abortion, but the services, where are the services, and are they accessible? And when you talk about accessibility, where can we get it? And that's why if you ask me, all of us should be really mad and saying abortion services should be like the way you go to the hospital and you're like, I'm having an headache, I need service, public service to be able to access, or just as any illness you might have. But the idea is that when coming from the community I am in, that's not the reality. It's unfortunate that Maria stops, even me, Mwikali, I can't afford. As how loud I am, I can't afford. And I hope Maria stop people are also in the call, just to know that it's in record that it's hard most of the time, even as an advocate, where as also as first responder, trying to get a woman or a young woman to get the services, but we can't afford now. You have to do like a kamini kamchango or kamini arambe for the girl to access the services and not to die in the hands of quack. But at the same time, we feel politics around language, and Mwikali Kivani can attest to this. We spoke even last week during the work we're doing also with Kellen, that when it comes to a poor woman, it's abortion. But when it comes to a privileged woman, and I'm not saying I'm putting class issue, but that's the reality in terms of inequality, the language shifted and then it's called, let's say, miscarriage. And being in this community, you get a lot of backlash, and understanding that where we work, even ourselves, we are surrounded with a lot of churches, million churches. Churches are many even than schools. Yeah? So you find that even us who work around the issue and community, they know we are able to be called like sisi ni watenda dhambi wakubwa, sisi ndo tunaua. So you find we are exposed to a lot of risk and a lot of victimization, not only just to our community and our families, but also within the movement. And this is the thing, even for me, I'm very clear we need to talk about also being an activist and being in human rights spaces where also there is struggle within a struggle, that the others who see their struggle is much better. But when it comes to women's struggle or our access to contraceptive or abortion, it's a big issue. But also it goes back to us holding government accountable, like even with the JMM case, the ruling. Yes, it was ruled in court, but how was it localized or domesticated? So that if they are, like what happens here, the reality is that if there are rumors a chief has heard you try to procure an abortion, he they organize, that's where you get the judgment, even without going the due process of the court. They organize the police, and we have seen like one of the biggest issues that has been our challenge is also fighting with the administrative system, where we tell them there's procedure. Even if you hold me, I'm criminal, there's a procedure. But through this, I wanted just to have a reflective moment around two cases that maybe we can think through, that we have been also like trying to think through as a movement. One, and may the soul of our comrade rest in peace, our comrade Caroline Mwatha. You also, when the case of Caroline Mwatha, how it went when she was being, for those who don't know Caroline Mwatha, she was a very strong activist, human rights defender, doing fantastic work for this country. She went missing because of her work. But later the government came with a botched abortion narrative. You all know within the movement how it went in terms of criminalizing even women human rights defenders, and how the movement, we felt that movement that was supposed to protect us sort of disowned us and ran away. And where we saw even male NGO leaders speaking on behalf of women and not us speaking for ourselves, and the kind of backlash we got. So that's one of the cases I would like, maybe as much as we continue with this kind of work, we think through and how to reflect, what do we learn from that moment? One, I felt that it showed us, as much as it was painful, there is a reason. If there's a right time for us to be together, it's now. If Carol was a bougie privileged woman or a bougie feminist or activist with big budgets, should have been protected. But the fact, because she's from Dandora, whichever narrative comes, they're like, let's go with it. The other case is about Sharon Otieno. Kika, you're also involved. Us who are talking about consent and justice for Sharon, but also we are the other comrades of ours talking about rights to the unborn child. Which unborn child are we talking about? If you're talking about also Sharon life and our choice and agency and consent. So the reason why I'm bringing this kind of story is also like reflecting moment of seeing where we are as a movement and what needs to be done. These are two realities of two grassroots women that governments looked for different narrative in public and society and rights, religious fundamentalists to try to wash it away. But the other thing that I wanted to bring to the attention is that for us, we get these cases afresh. We get it when the first trimester has passed, and then you're like, here's the case, how do you help? So, but also is to acknowledge there are a lot of comrades, including Akina Tabitha, Mikali Kivani, Akina Lina, and the rest who have been there for us, who also we have pushed them to be able to contribute in some of these processes. And that's why for me, even having this discussion should be having like a rapid response fund for access to abortion. That's something I'll not stop making noise for it. You can imagine the whole process of healing and everything. And then at the same time, if there's not enough support, it becomes tricky because the existing systems that works within our local community, they are not enabling. That's why you would see people like in a Ministry of Health going ahead, signing documentation that even criminalizing people like ourselves, because also if you're talking about sexual reproductive health and rights, that's why I'm very clear, sexual reproductive, not just reproductive, because some of us also want to have sex for pleasure. So does it criminalize us? We don't want to have sex, let's say, for just having babies. At the same time, when we choose to have babies, also people should respect that. But at the same time, why use narrative that of making us feel and being subjected to more violence than to more support and more dignified way of living. So these are some of the cases, Shiko, I wanted maybe we look up to it, and influencing the point that we need to be embracing unapologetically our sex positivity, our lived reality, because at the same time, some of the cases even we handle in CGHRD, some of the people who take advantage of young girls, if it's rape or if it's incest, they are those pastors who tell us here, praise the Lord. And they're the same people who are the oppressors who are in supporting citizen go. So if they're the same people, and you remember what we said last time at the Emory, if you say there's hakuna dhambi kubwa na ndogo zote ni sawa mbele ya, the way they say it mbele ya Bwana, then why criminalize us? So I think for me, it's just a matter of where we are now. It's a matter of being bold and brave enough, but at the same time supporting the comrades, the sisters, the friends and allies to be able to invest on causes that are putting most of us at risk, because this work puts a lot of us at risk. And when the rubber hits the road, especially if you're an activist working on sexual reproductive health and rights, you're not seen as the proper activist. It's hard to get support. And some of us, are hard to go to exile because of some of these issues. And at least we are seeing people coming up to, and young population like ourselves speaking out. So for me, it's just a matter of dignifying and not seeing certain class of women needs to have privilege than the others, but at the same time seeing how do we have reciprocative solidarity and allyship and movement building that is inclusive, that is responsive, that is authentic, that is supportive. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. And thank you for reminding us about Caroline Mwatha and Sharon Otieno. And I think I remember vividly that when most of us went outside and did a vigil for Sharon, we were told we are promoting immorality. When most of us again went online and spoke against the murder of Caroline, we were told we as women, human rights defenders and feminists, we should learn to stop sleeping with other people's husbands and getting pregnant irresponsibly. So these are some of the hurtful statements that come out every day, and you wonder, are you fighting for the rights that you're not entitled for? Or if you cannot fight for your own rights, how will you be able to fight for other people's rights? But this also brings me to you, Benson. We see how this has been unpacked. We see how this policy is really unfair to us. A few months ago, March 20th or 19th, we saw the Malindi ruling, right, by the High Court. What does this mean? And does it mean that we never made a step from this ruling? Does it mean that we never learned that actually, even from our own systems, we can fight for these rights? Does it mean that the ministry did not approve of what that ruling was? Benson.
All right, thank you very much. I want also to echo the words of Rachel before I talk about the Malindi case, that in all this, plus what Mwikali has talked about, you can see a pattern of a very intransparent government and ministry in terms of trying to curtail or the information that goes out. For example, we see the ministry rushing out to publish a policy, a public policy, lacking participation of the people, especially the adolescents who are supposed to be governed by that kind of a policy. We also see that through it, we see a lot of discrimination, which are contrary to the laws that we already have in terms of, guiding, reproductive health. It is important that we, at this particular moment, we embrace a reproductive justice framework in terms of, trying to promote reproductive health. Because when you listen to what Rachel was talking about, you will find out that reproductive health issues are very broad, but when we adopt a particular approach to it, we narrow down to a very small area whereby we leave out many people. For example, about the different classes, that when you look at women, they're not a homogeneous kind of, social group. There are others. When you talk about the law, we have the law can be just, universal, but we have the needs of others within that the law cannot, adequately address, their issues. And I had prepared to also give an overview of the Malindi case that is now famously known as the PAC case vis-a-vis the Roe versus Wade, the implications that the overturning of Roe, the kind of ripple effects that it can have in jurisdictions in Africa and, particularly Kenya. To just put it into perspective, that the Roe versus Wade, a historic case that constitutionalized rights to privacy. At the center of Roe versus Wade was right to privacy that actually informed and inspired many of the laws on abortion that we have beyond even the US and even in Africa. Most of the liberal laws that we have were actually inspired by the Roe versus Wade. The implication of it was that although Roe versus Wade did not actually engender the gender equality as it is even in our constitution right now, Article 26(4), which actually brings in issue of gender equality, the law restored, gave access and diminished unsafe abortions in the United States that were very high. But the implication of overturning Roe versus Wade means that the power has now been taken away from women being able to decide in their private, situation, to be able to decide whether to terminate a pregnancy or to keep it. And it is now being sent back to legislators, which is also almost a similar outcome that came from the Malindi case, whereby now Parliament is given their powers to be able to legislate, to be able to say that we can access or we can permit to this extent. However, the difference is that in Kenya, we have a number of safeguards because access to abortion has been constitutionalized, and whereby the legislators can only expand grounds but not limit grounds because they're already in the constitution. But we are also seeing how politics can be used to curtail access to reproductive health. Whenever you have a very conservative regime, you see how this was planned in this US Supreme Court. And we are also likely to see that in terms of if you have judges who are not progressive and are very conservative, it's very easy, because I've heard from Alvin that there is a pending appeal by the opposition on the Malindi case, meaning that if you get judges who are not progressive, then they can likely overturn also the decision in the Park case, because the decision on the Park case was the judges heavily relied on the case of Roe versus Wade. To just look at the case of Park, we see that there is no much shift from JMM case because the biggest problem we have is the penal code. As we speak, the penal code is still being used to regulate abortions in Kenya. When you look at the penal code and you look at the constitution is supreme. The penal code is secondary to the constitution, but the penal code criminalizes even grounds that have been given for women to be able to access abortion.
Benson, I think he's dropped. I don't know what just happened to him. But as he comes back, I think he's really given us some points to think about. he's really taken us to the next point. I think this conversation just get to someone and you're pissed about it, but you're also like, I think opening up this box and having more of these conversations is leading us in the right direction. But listening to what Benson has said and what all the other amazing panelists have said, I just want, and I'm just thinking, Mukali Kivuvani, what are the achievements that we've made so far? We've been doing this, we've fought again and again, we've put in a lot of resource into this, but what does it really mean? Have we achieved anything so far?
Thank you, Shika. In regards to our achievement, honestly, for me, I'll go back to we are having this discussion. It wasn't happening many years back. So we are here having this discussion. We have young people involved. Look at the Alvins, Esthers, the Lucys. We have young people who are actually, the people who are now championing and who are actually now speaking and saying, this is our right. We are having also, because we are speaking out, and of course, I think also social media has elaborated our discussion. We are having support even from people we didn't think. And I know we normally look at, especially like religious leaders as opposition, but we also have religious leaders who are very progressive and who are actually saying, yes, it's true. You guys, there's a problem and we need to do something about it. And for me, it also brings up the discussion, like I had brought it up, and I know it hasn't come up and I thought it would, but because we are discussing it, now we are seeing county governments putting money specifically for sexual reproductive health and rights activities, infrastructure, human resource. There are counties out there that are actually now purposing, but that purposeness has also come because of the awareness. It has come because of the education. It has come because of the discussions that we've been having. We have a lot of training and capacity building and strengthening that has also happened. We had, so for example, the Alliance has been doing a lot of training on gender transformative approaches with healthcare workers. We've been strengthening the capacity of young people in advocacy. We've been strengthening the capacity of even government officials, MCAs, and other policymakers. When a policymaker also stands up, it's on a negative platform, but when a policymaker to me also stands and says something in regards to sexually reproductive health, even if it's about teenage pregnancy, for me, it says something that they're aware. They're deflecting, but they're aware. So in all honesty, no one will ever come and say, hatukuambiwa ama hatukujua. Yeah. So even when Rachel was talking about all the cases and before Chakaya dropped off, he was talking about like the Malindi case and all that. These cases, for that Malindi case specifically, when you're asking me about the hope that we have, that Malindi case has said something. If you think about it, that Malindi case was all over the news in the world. Why? Because Kenyans are finally agreeing and noticing and being cognizant of the issues that we have. We can no longer sit back and say, as much as even now Roe versus Wade has come to put a dampen on it, we had a ruling. It's back in court, yes. We have to go through the appeal and everything, which I hope that as a movement, everybody here, we are being ready and reading that judgment and understanding. But for me, it also says, there was an aha moment, even in the Court of Justice, that there is a problem, there is an issue. Our constitution is progressive. It saddens me when I still hear people saying abortion is illegal in Kenya. It is not. Abortion is restrictive. But this illegal terminology and this restrictiveness of abortion in this country is what has given the loophole for this illegal and unsafe abortions, pardon me. Because like Rachel puts it, it's an elitist, there's no equality or equity in that. Because if I have the money in this country, I will get an abortion. And that's the truth. We can hide it if we want. But when young girls and women in the informal settlements especially, or also those in the rural areas, or those also who do not have information and education, because you can be living in Nairobi, you can be living in Kilimani, but if I don't want to speak to my mother or a guardian and I don't know where to go, I'm also going to go and get that unsafe abortion. So for me, my joy right now, and a lot of these young people, especially on this forum, I call them my children, we have mentored them. We have coached them. My pride is even as I drop off this space, that I have left champions, I have left leaders, I have left activists and advocates to carry on this work. That means it's not dying. And if it's not going to die with us today, Shiko, then we have hope of getting a lot more done in the next couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mwikali. And you see, the amazing thing is that I will say I'm also a recruit. I've been a human rights defender for a long time. I have never took time to have a genuine conversation about this specific topic. Not because I was shying away from it, but because I think I got into the space with a different focus. And then I realized it's hitting home every day. I've seen so many young women. I've gone to so many sessions where you find that, you know, it is as low as sex for Kangumu is a norm. And this is a 15-year-old giving you these stories, and it worries you that we do not even protect these kids. It worries you that we do not have these conversations just because there's some restrictions that are there. But before we go back to Benson, Steph, Roe versus Wade, what does this mean to the milestones we've made? I know Benson has mentioned, I know Mwikali has mentioned, but looking at it legally, what does this mean to the Malindi case especially? And also, if you can add on it, what also does it mean to the resource that comes in? Because we depend heavily on the West to fund some of our activities, simply because we have a government that is not willing to put in money to that end. What does this mean?
Yeah, absolutely, Shiko, as you rightly put it. If we're looking at it from a policy position point of view, if we look at the Mexico City policy or the global gag rule, which is a policy by the US, that cuts all funding to nonprofit organizations overseas, if they're talking about abortion or, providing the services and providing advocacy. Now, if we look at what that has done to Africa and to Kenya, with every Democrat in power, they withdraw the rule, and with every Republican in power, they, reinstate the rule. So you kind of find women's health and rights out of the US, including here in Africa, it's like a ball in ping pong going back and forth, because, America is the largest funder of health overseas in the whole world, if we're looking at global health. If America is taking these policy positions, if Washington is taking a stance as curtailing or clawing back on Roe versus Wade, then African states are going to follow suit, whether we like it or not. And I'm a very strong Pan-African. I subscribe to the ideologies of Pan-Africanism. However, the fact is that America remains a global giant. They fund in Kenya up to 95% of the monies that we have on sexual and reproductive health and rights come from the US. So if policy positions in Washington are going towards clawing back on the rights on sexual and reproductive health, then that's the same, African countries are going to try and align with the US, because if you're living in a glass house, you do not throw stones. So, in terms of funding, we're going to definitely see this get affected. And that's why when we have bills such as the East African Community Sexual and Reproductive Health Bill that seeks to secure our sexual and reproductive health and rights as Kenyans and as East Africans, it's so important that some of these proposed laws and proposals coming out of the continent, it's important for them to be prioritized, so that even though, and yes, we stand in solidarity with our sisters in the US, women and girls in the US. As feminists, we stand in solidarity with them, and it's horrible to see. But we should remain unshaken, so that whatever happens in the global north is not shaking up Africa. So we have to secure our rights in that way. But in terms of the legal framework as we see it, even though we do not invoke the name Roe versus Wade, we know that Roe versus Wade has influenced the liberalization of abortions in Africa. And, we saw that when Roe versus Wade, passed in the 70s, Tunisia followed with a similar, kind of holding. to their laws on safe abortion, access to safe abortion. We saw Cape Verde. The United Nations Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which is the CEDAW, also speaks to the issue of access to safe abortion in the same way that it is held in the decision of Roe versus Wade. Years later, about 30 years later, Africans came together and passed the Protocol on the Rights of Women, which is commonly referred to as the Maputo Protocol. Article 14 of the Maputo Protocol gives the right to reproductive health. And if you look at Article 14.2c, which talks about the issue of safe abortion, it also borrows from the decision that was coming out of Roe versus Wade. A lot of African states ratified the Maputo Protocol with reservations as to Article 14.2c. Now, what does flowing back on Roe versus Wade mean for us? It means that countries that have already ratified this protocol with reservations as to that particular provision will be emboldened to maintain those reservations, even though we know that from a point of international law, reservations are not to be held perpetually. You're not supposed to hold them until kingdom come. And we've seen Rwanda lift their reservations as to that particular protocol. So what we're seeing is that countries that have already ratified the protocol are going to be emboldened to maintain those reservations. As it is, 45 countries out of the 55 across the continent have ratified this protocol. And so the remaining countries that are yet to ratify will also be emboldened to ratify it as with reservations as to that protocol. So it's highly problematic to see. And as one of the panelists talked about with the Malindi case, we've already seen the Kenya Christian Professionals Forum led by Charles Kanjama having gone to the courts and filed an appeal on the Malindi case. In the judgment and in the decision that the court made, the judge relied upon and cited Roe versus Wade, the Dobbs versus Jackson cases, which are all interlinked and go back to Roe versus Wade. So what then happens is that the opposition is going to use this, and we're already seeing them doing it, they're going to use the overturning of this decision to also overturn some progressive legal decisions coming out of the courts in Africa. So we definitely have a lot to be concerned about.
Thank you, Steph. I don't know, I just feel like this is a conversation that can go on and go on. Rachel Mwikali, how do we uphold these achievements that they might be very few, they might be minimal, but also Mwikali mentioned about the spaces that have been created, having more voices come on board, which those are major achievements in the space. But how do we uphold them? We've seen a lot of resistance from the system, the resistance from the church. How do we then uphold the achievements that we've made?
Thank you so much, Shiko. And I totally agree with every speaker, and I love the way also, Steph, we have done the breaking down in different countries, and I will do the same. I will still insist the same. We are still at risk. Go and read about Geneva Consensus Declaration. We can talk about Roe versus Wade, we can talk about the RH policy, but also check about Geneva Consensus Declaration and join the movement in pushing government, Kenya, especially Kenyan government, to withdraw from Geneva Consensus Declaration. So you're asking me, Shiko, how do we uphold? One, ensuring that we breathe life to the Constitution. And thank you, Mwikali Kivuvani, for saying that abortion is not illegal in Kenya. Because what is sold outside, people are told abortion is legal in Kenya. Abortion is not illegal in Kenya, it's restricted. So also when you move, let your church or your singing be that abortion is not illegal in Kenya. Secondly, let's organize more effectively within our own movement, within our own spaces, to ensure that when we're doing our own advocacy or our own activism or work, it has intersectionality perspective. I can see also comrades from America, Bria, shout out. I can see you, and also some comrades from other spaces, even Ria. Thank you for joining, because also it's about the conversation that we all need to be free. I'm not free when, Shiko, you're not free. But at the same time, also if the opposition have been using the foreign language to fight us, can we flip it also a bit and tell them, let's say whatever has happened abroad is not happening here. Let's have local solution. Like whatever is happening in Kenya, we are going to deal with it the Kenyan way, the local way, the Eastern Africa way. And I love what Steph also have said, being Pan-Africanist, what are the local solutions? We have seen was it last week? Was it the Sierra Leone government also legalized abortion? If Sierra Leone can legalize, and where are we as Kenyans? So for me, it's just also a matter of also like celebrating the small wins. Yes, we were caught off guard with some of the things, but ensuring that we are able to even co-create spaces that I'm also dignifying the discussion. I'm also not criminalizing. Because the way you said, Shiko, that's the thing, even within our own movement as CJHRD, or creating a platform like Pussy Power, it's very inclusive. It doesn't matter if you are Barbie or not Barbie, but seeing also what are you bringing in the space? What are you also contributing in the space without saying, oh, nyinyi wa ghetto, hatuwezi deal na nyinyi. Ama nyinyi wa ghetto, I'm due family planning, I'm due contraceptive, and accessing it fast, it's a problem. But at the same time, out naming and shaming government of Kenya, naming and shaming individual also hold those kind of position within this, they're supposed to protect us and they're not protecting us. But at the same time, let's not give up. We can't, like, there's a time we can't give up is now. This is the time that we need to bring the collective power, the collective way of organizing. I respect online spaces, but being also, you call it millennials or Gen Z, I still believe in traditional way of organizing where we bring numbers. Let's have a discussion. Let's have valid clarification. But at the same time, I don't agree to the way we would say women to take the burden of educating people or men about our right to health. Make Google your friends, read research, let's do political education to ourselves to understand why it's important. Like the way I say that it's a way of us, we are not free. Like if it can happen, let's say the way when we talk, I know maybe many of you would not agree. If, for example, you are seeing women in America getting attacked and we talk about also privilege, what does it mean in Kenya? So seeing what are the things that have worked that have not been in line with us, but also building global solidarity. Global solidarity or transnational solidarity has also been instrumental and very important in ensuring that we also say, if I cannot make noise when I'm in Madare, Shiko, if you are in Nakuru, make noise on my behalf. Or also, it's important also for mainstream also organization to know when to step back, when to step front, and also how to support local-led initiative. Because one of the things when you ask me, we need to do better. We are fighting with Akinan Kyoko, who they don't need a proposal or concept to.
Rachel, you're breaking.
Can you hear me, Shiko?
Yes, I can hear you.
I think in terms of resources, so also it's important to decolonize resources, like make resources available, especially to the youth and feminist-led initiative. But also, the other thing is also holding funders accountable. Who funder is funding what? Why would a funder, let's say, for example, and this one I have to call some people out, fund organization. If I offend anybody, I'm sorry, but also I'm not sorry. Like AMREF, the way they are funded, but also they are playing double standards. Why? And then we say in the same space, Maria stops the same. Why do that? I know they have a lot of resources, but I think where we are now, it's important to call out people because it's about our life. It's about, we are recognizing the work that has been done there before, but also where we are now, we can't risk putting women's life at stake.
Thank you, Rachel. And I hear you when you say, let's hold each other accountable. With as much as we're going to be there for each other, with as much as we're going to hold each other's back, it's important to hold each other accountable in this space.
I echo my colleagues, the discussions they've had, but I still insist on reproductive justice approach, advocacy around reproductive health, particularly access to abortion. And the Malindi case is actually anchored in the Constitution. From my opinion, I don't believe that there will be a lot of threats to the ruling based on Roe versus Wade, because our Constitution has codified privacy. Privacy is a constitutional right within our Constitution. It is also important as advocates advocate for greater access that when you look at the Malindi case, the theme within the case was actually access to information, that there must be greater access to information in terms of grounds to access abortion. For example, when you criminalize a conduct without giving information as to when is abortion lawful and when it's not lawful, you create an environment that creates an aura of illegality, even for services that are already legal and you deter those ones who are supposed to benefit from that particular service. So the ultimate goal actually is decriminalization of abortion. But already we have grounds that women and girls and gender non-conforming people can be able to access abortion. But the perpetuation of, the vagueness and ambiguousness within the law, then it makes it very difficult, even for someone who has a certain level of education, notwithstanding those ones who live in rural areas and informal sectors. And that's why I still also say that when we take a reproductive justice approach that is very sensitive to intersectionalities, that says that these are steps that the government needs to take to ensure that even in the local clinics, that the girl in a slums or in a rural area can know that I can approach a midwife and be able to get abortion service. And then, make it very clear, even to women who would ordinarily not want to access abortion service, that they know this is a constitutional right that my neighbor should access because she needs the service. I don't need the service. Maybe because of my religion, I don't need the service, but she needs the service because she needs it at this particular time. So that, we have a sort of overlapping consensus that the Constitution has recognized abortion. So it also recognizes that I have a right to my own religion. So I should not interfere with the other person, should be able to. So that is what the Constitution 2010 aspirations and promises to women within Article 26(4). So I believe this is an area that we need to ensure that the state goes out publicly to say that you can access abortion to this extent, but still, us as advocates will still keep the fire burning that we have total decriminalization. But the liberal laws must benefit women at this particular time because we already have that. Yes, we still fight for, total decriminalization. And just to end, the African Commission, through Article or Regulation 60, has been given a leeway to be able to borrow from other jurisdictions on what they've done. But they have to look at what is progressive. But they can also export some of the progressive rulings that have happened in Africa. And we expect the same from Kenya, that Kenya would not want to go the way of the US and struck down some of the very progressive rulings that we've had, but we'll continue to keep watch and provide more information to activists so that they can be able to, with the support of the court, be able to safeguard and even keep at bay some of the excesses that we are seeing from the executive.
Let's use like a different case scenario. 2017, when Kenyan election had issue, the fact that John Kerry spoke, everybody was like, if John Kerry spoke or America spoke, they are perfectly okay. We are following whatever they are doing. So for me, I'll not say we celebrate, but it's also like defending the gains that have been made. Defending the gains that for those who went during the redrafting of the RH policy, from the reports we got, and you can correct me, Mikale Kivuvani, most of the reference were being used were from the United States of America, from the opposition side point of view. The people who are funding opposition are from the United States of America. So if we are saying this decision will not affect us, I think we have to be very careful. Yes, it can, yes, it cannot. But at the same time, we are saying the Malindi ruling, which is very good, but how many local people, local community, apart from us who are in this space, understand that ruling on how important it is? So I feel it's our responsibility to ensure that the community understand the importance and the gains on that. When you talk about rights to information, many patients, we are all desperate, including myself when we go to public hospital. Most of us, we don't know if there's something called like patient charter, that you can tell the service provider, like, I have rights to my privacy. We have seen now with the in thing of the US agreement with the Kenyan government, you can't be tested even for HIV/AIDS without having a heterosexual male partner. So I think we have to be very clear what we look on to paper. Does it appear into practicality? We talk about rights to information where we know clearly, even with the RH policy, some of us, if it were not most of you had access to this information, would have not gotten access to information. Some of you are called to the validation process. Your access to information was denied. Your right to access to information was denied. But all ahead, they went and launched the policy. So I think from just saying things are good, we need to be also talk what is the reality in the ground, what is real meaning happen, so that we're able to say, yes, we're celebrating, it's good, but also how do we protect? I'll say, let us not relax.
Yeah.
Tusiangalie simba imenyesha ukadhania ni pusi. Let us kill it before it grows to kwa simba. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. I see Mwikali, your hand is also up.
Yeah, the Mwikalis are on fire because yes, I agree. I agree with Chakaya, but I totally agree with Mwikali. Please, for me, the statement is, it cannot be understated what a profound and reversible impact this decision will have, and especially globally. Because Steph had already alluded to it, that the US is the biggest funder, and especially on reproductive health. It fills that critical gap on reproductive health. And like I keep on saying, the problem is the discussion is coming from, and what we are hearing right now, the discussion is coming from, if the US has rescinded Roe versus Wade, why are we advocating for it? And I go back to say again, their problems and their challenges are not ours. And foreign policy influence cannot continue to dictate the policy and implementation of sexual reproductive health in our country. Our reproductive and maternal health services are inadequate. We already know that. How do we now look at funding being reduced from USAID and all these big funders to a government that has not even gotten anywhere near the 15% of the Abuja Declaration for health? How again do we see health and how health will be funded? So, like Mikali is saying, we cannot just continue to discuss and talk about it in a light way. We have to make sure that when we are having this discussion, the discussion stems from, number one, policy. It's stemming from the challenges that we are having. We are domesticating it, Shiko. Like you, Africa is Africa. We cannot keep on talking about the things that are happening in the West, because then now they need to affect us. And another thing we also have to understand is the political divide, like Steph has mentioned, because it's a Democratic thing and a Republican thing. So once and for all, this issue of the GAGRO, the Miss Mexico policy, has to go. So from the US, because now if somebody like Trump comes back, Mexico policy comes back. And then we also have the Geneva Consensus, like Nkali mentioned. So these political divides affecting women and children dying elsewhere needs to stop in America. So it needs to be curbed now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mwikali. And I love the insights. I've learned quite a lot today. And the one thing that has really stood out for me is there is so much more to unpack in this conversation. There's so much more truth to even tell ourselves in this conversation. And to even a point of how do we keep our leaders accountable? Because I pay tax so that I'm protected. My tax is not treated any less because I'm a woman. My tax is not treated any less because I'm demanding for certain rights as a woman. So I would want to know how we keep the government accountable. But I've seen a question that is quite interesting in the chat box. And Johnson asks, have any government official in Kenya recognized the abortion rights revolution happening in Latin America? Anyone who has any information, who has seen any government official recognize this? I don't think I have seen any, and I don't think we'll see any coming out and recognizing it. But I don't know if any of our panelists has information on this.
According to me and everything I've been reading, watching, listening, none of our government officials has recognized anything that has happened in Latin America, regardless of the abortion rights. Nothing has been done, nothing has been said, nothing has been written.
Unfortunately. Do we have any more questions before I give our guests? So I believe we have no questions. We are just like 8 minutes past time, and I'm believing I'm recovering the time that we started a bit late. So I want to give our panelists just a minute each. Just give us their last remarks. What do you think, and what is the way forward? So we start with Benson. Are you with us?
Yes, I am. I believe at this particular time calls for vigilance As my colleagues have said, it's important that we be very vigilant in terms of our strategies. We need to recalibrate, and then we need to come up with the new ways of countering the opposition, because this judgment, the US has emboldened them. And so we are likely to see a lot of movement. We also need to build movements that are wider, that are not, we should not restrict ourselves to the traditional kind of movements within the SRHR. I believe we have other movements that still have the same objectives, though in different sectors, other sectors who can also come in and work with us. But all in all, we need to ensure that our approach is wide-based in terms of recognizing the intersectionalities that we have. As some of our panelists have ably put, that when you take a narrow kind of approach, you will find out that you reduce reproductive health to a few elites, leaving out the masses who suffer much reproductive injustices.
Thank you very much, Benson, and thank you for being bold enough to stand with us and fight with us. Rachel Mwikali.
I think for me, it's just to appreciate everyone for speaking truth to power, for continue organizing and being vocal. But one thing I'll say, abortion right is health right is also human rights. So we should not shy away, and human rights are universal. So let's continue organizing and resisting oppression, but at the same time, being able to organize and personalize and respect also lived experiences of people.
Thank you very much, Rachel. As long as rights are universal, then we can always demand and not beg for them. Mwikali Kivuvani, karibu.
We are going into an election period. Most of us have already decided who we are voting for. But I'll go back to President Obama's quote, choices have consequences. As we vote, could we kindly all be sober on that day and realize that that person who's giving you 50 bob or 100 bob, is he going to make the decision that affects our lives and our lived realities? Does that person have an inclination of what sexual reproductive health is? Does that person understand the lived realities of all women in all their diversity and everybody in all their diversities? We can't keep on talking about the same thing without an action. So my plea, my call to even the young people who I honestly hope we are voting, because yes, it is your democratic right not to vote. It is also a democratic right to vote. But voting means you have a voice, and that gives you power to hold leaders accountable. 2, our rights will not, shall not be taken away from us as we are lying silent. Rachel Mwikali will go to the streets. Mwikali Kivuvani will support her to go to that street. We have to play our different roles in the different spaces, the different seats we make. We need a lot of more evidence. The chakayas are there. Evidence speaks and evidence makes policy. Whatever we do, whatever we engage in, however we implement, make sure we are collecting that data, documenting that data, but more importantly, sharing the data. Thank you very much for being in this space. It was an amazing discussion, Shiko, and thank you for moderating.
Thank you, Mwikali. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Benson. And Steph in absentia. You people have been amazing. You've given us loads and loads of information. If you came into this space and you're living without a new lesson, without having picked something, then please write to me and question me, because I might not have asked the right question. And as Mwikali Kivuvani has said, let us all play our roles in different sectors. And I am a believer in also the power that we have online, the space that we have. So as Rachel organizes in the grassroots, I will also then come in and support from the online spaces. As I return the mic back to our hosts, I am really appreciative that you guys have kept in, have been tweeting out there. I see hashtag the Malindi case is trending. You people are amazing. And I really appreciate you. Thank you to Zamara, supported by the Women Global Network for Reproductive Rights. Thank you for having us, and thank you for enabling this space. Alvin, my time is up. Back to you. Thank you.
I do want to believe and hope that the young people, as well as the audience that is here, has been able to clearly know what is happening within the space, because then we want to see how we reduce the stigma on the access of reproductive health, the information, and the services to everybody. Okay, to everybody. And I hope that the breakdown in terms of how, number one, the Roe versus Wade may actually be able to inform, the policies, the work, the programs within the country has been clear. So of course we need to speak and say we do not want this, because the more the voices, then the stronger we are. Number two, I do want to believe that we have also had, in terms of where we are at when it comes to the EAC, the SRHR bill, which is before the EALA, the Parliament. We did have the hearings, I think, in the last 3 weeks, and we had all the countries within the region just share, what they actually think. And then when we bring the discussion home, is that we do have the discussions on one, the reproductive health policy, which was launched. Of course, there are things we are happy about, but of course there are the other things which we are still like bado. And then number two, we still have the national, the adolescent sexual reproductive health policy, which is still in review. We need to still speak out and be aware in terms of what is happening, for us to be able to actually to ensure that all of the issues we believe in, we speak about, are part of the processes. The fifth key thing is we need to continue to increase the knowledge when it comes to these issues. Number one, the contraception issue. We still need to speak about it and chat about it. Why? Because unfortunately, the Ministry of Health, as well as the parents here, they are still continuing to bury their heads in the sand. For the barest of the minimum, if that's even a word, is we need to provide information to the adolescents. Number two, of course, we need to increase the knowledge when it comes to what is the state of the abortion within the country. As we have heard, abortion is not illegal in Kenya. It is restricted. So which means there are provisions within the constitution, as well as the guidelines do provide for the access and the support of this. Okay. Number three, I cannot stress this enough, is that we need to continue to shout about comprehensive sexuality, the education for everyone. For everyone. Okay. Because we can't still be ranked as the third country in the world when it comes to, the pregnancies. And one of the key things that I do believe we do not have is the information. The adolescents, the teenagers need comprehensive information for them to know that in case I engage in a safe sex, is that I might get, someone pregnant, or in case I am infected with HIV or the STIs, is that I will be able to actually to pass it if I do not know. Okay, so continue to shout. I'd like to thank the organizers, the organizers of this discussion who are here. They are Zamara Foundation, as well as the organization that I lead, which is known as Youth Empowerment Movement Kenya. That's YEM Kenya, with the support of Women Global Network for Reproductive Rights, the office in Tanzania, which has been spearheading this process to ensure that we are reducing the stigma on all of these issues. I will want to wish you all a great day, an evening, and hoping that you will have the time to just pass by on Twitter and see what the young people are saying. The discussions from this webinar have really been shared on Twitter, and we do hope that you may be able to find time and just check out what the young people are saying. I think from my end and from the whole team that has been doing the planning for this webinar, is just to appreciate all the speakers, including the moderator Shiko, for a good job. I hope you have learned. That time that I officially close the webinar, and do wish you all a good rest of the day. Bye for now.